Do not show your face at Christmas Eve because my boyfriend is a prominent neurosurgeon, and having you there would ruin my story. That was the ultimatum my younger sister Jasmine delivered to me in a crowded restaurant. My parents sat there and said nothing. I looked at them and simply said, "Okay." They thought I was defeated. They thought I was the family failure who needed to be hidden away like a dirty secret. They had no idea that 3 days later, that same neurosurgeon boyfriend would walk into my office for a consultation. When he saw the Forbes cover on my wall titled Healthcare Tech CEO of the Year with my face on it, he started screaming. My name is Aaliyah, and I am 32 years old. This is the story of how I let my family dig their own graves before I buried them in it. If you have ever been the black sheep who outgrew the flock, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe because the payoff in this story is going to be incredibly satisfying. The humiliation began on a Tuesday night at Le Ciel, one of the most pretentious French restaurants in downtown Chicago. I had just come from my office at Vanguard Health Solutions, where I had spent 12 hours coding a new algorithm for detecting medical billing fraud. I was wearing a gray, oversized hoodie and comfortable jeans because when you own the company, you can dress however you want. I parked my 10-year-old Honda Civic around the corner. It was my decoy car, the one I used when I visited my family, because they thrived on the narrative that I was struggling. I walked into the restaurant, and the warmth of the heater hit my face, but the reception at table 4 was freezing. My sister Jasmine was already there. She was wearing a dress that screamed new money, and a Chanel bag that I knew for a fact was a high-quality knockoff from Canal Street. My mother Beatrice and my father Elijah were sitting stiffly beside her, looking like they were posing for a church directory photo. I pulled out a chair to sit down and reached for the menu because I was starving. Jasmine immediately reached across the table and slapped her hand down on the menu, pinning it to the tablecloth. "Do not order anything yet," she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of silverware clinking. "We are not here to eat dinner, Aaliyah. This is a strategy meeting for Christmas Eve, and we need to set some ground rules." I looked at my parents. My father was busy adjusting his silk tie, avoiding my eyes. My mother was inspecting her manicure. They were letting Jasmine run the show as always. I pulled my hand back and leaned into the chair, crossing my arms. "Okay, Jasmine," I said, my voice flat. "What is the strategy?" Jasmine sat up straighter, puffing out her chest. "Caleb is coming to Christmas Eve dinner. Dr. Caleb Sterling. He is a neurosurgeon at St. Luke Hospital. He comes from a very established white family in Connecticut. This is it, Aaliyah. This is my chance to enter the elite circle. I have spent 2 years curating an image for him. I told him our family is dignified, that we are old-school Chicago excellence." I raised an eyebrow. "And what does that have to do with me ordering appetizers?" Jasmine looked me up and down, her eyes lingering with disgust on my sneakers. "Look at you, Aaliyah. You look like you just rolled out of a shelter. You drive a car that sounds like a lawnmower. You do not fit the narrative. If Caleb sees you, he will think we have baggage. He will think we have financial liabilities. I cannot risk him thinking I come from a family that tolerates failure." I felt a cold laugh bubbling up in my chest, but I kept it down. Failure. That was the word they always used. Because I didn't marry a pastor or a doctor. Because I dropped out of a traditional nursing program to study computer science. Because I refused to spend money on flashy clothes to impress people at church. To them, I was a disappointment. To the tech world, I was a ghost, a silent billionaire in the making who controlled the data of half the hospitals in the Midwest. But I could not tell them that. Not yet. "So you are uninviting me to Christmas?" I asked, looking directly at my mother. "Mom, are you okay with this?" Beatrice finally looked up. She touched her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she had whenever she was about to say something cruel. "Jasmine has a point, Aaliyah. This is a very delicate situation. Caleb is different. His world is different. We have to make a good impression. You know how judgmental people can be about families like ours. We do not want to give him any reason to look down on us." We told him, "You are away on a fellowship, a study abroad program in Europe. It sounds much better than the truth. The truth being that you are 32 single and working odd jobs. Odd jobs. That is what they thought I did. They never asked about my work. They just assumed that because I didn't wear a suit, I wasn't working. I looked at my father, hoping for a shred of defense. Dad, I haven't missed a Christmas dinner in my life. You are really going to kick me out because Jasmine is ashamed of me. Elijah cleared his throat and took a sip of his water. It is just 1 year, Aaliyah. Do not be dramatic. We have to think about your sister's future. If she marries this doctor, it elevates all of us. You should be willing to make a sacrifice for the family legacy. We will send you a plate. Your mother makes excellent mac and cheese. We can pack some up for you to pick up the next day. The disrespect was so casual, it was breathtaking. They were treating me like a stray dog they fed out the back door. Send me a plate, as if I was starving, as if I couldn't buy this entire restaurant and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. I looked at Jasmine. She was smirking. It was a look of pure triumph. She had won. She had successfully cut the dead weight. She picked up her wine glass and swirled it. Do not look at me like that, Aaliyah. You should be thanking me. You would be uncomfortable anyway. Caleb talks about medical journals and investments. You would just sit there with nothing to contribute. It is a kindness, really, sparing you the embarrassment. I felt the anger burn in my stomach, hot and heavy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show them my bank balance. I wanted to tell them that Vanguard Health Solutions had just closed a Series A funding round that valued my company at $500 million. But I knew it wouldn't matter. To them, money only mattered if you wore it. Power only mattered if you married it. If I told them now, they would just accuse me of lying, or worse, they would immediately pivot from scorn to greed. They would demand I pay for the wedding. They would demand I buy them a house. And they would still treat me like the servant who got lucky. No, I needed them to feel the loss. I needed them to realize what they threw away when it was too late to get it back. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet restaurant. Jasmine flinched, expecting a scene. She wanted a scene. It would prove her point that I was ghetto and unrefined. I decided to give her nothing. I reached into the pocket of my hoodie and pulled out a money clip. I peeled off 5 $20 bills. It was pocket change to me, but to them it looked like my grocery money for the week. I dropped the bills on the pristine white tablecloth right next to Jasmine's fake Chanel bag. That is for my water, I said, my voice steady and cold. And for the entertainment. You guys put on a great show. I hope Caleb is worth it. I hope he is everything you dreamed of, Jasmine. Because after tonight you are on your own. Do not call me when the bill comes due. Jasmine laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, do not worry, sis. I won't need to call you. I am marrying a surgeon. My bills are paid for life. Bye, Aaliyah. Enjoy your microwave dinner on Christmas. My parents didn't even say goodbye. They were already looking at the menu, relieved that the problem had removed itself. I turned my back on them and walked out of the restaurant. I could feel the eyes of the other diners on me. They probably thought I was the poor relation begging for a handout. Let them think that. I stepped out into the Chicago winter. The wind off the lake was brutal, cutting through my hoodie, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The cord had been cut. They had made their choice. I walked to my car, my hands shaking slightly, not from the temperature, but from the adrenaline. I sat in the driver's seat of the Honda and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I let myself scream once, a short, sharp sound of frustration inside the closed car. Then I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. There was a text message waiting for me from Malik, my executive assistant and head of operations. It had come in 5 minutes ago while my mother was telling me I was a liability. I unlocked the screen. The message read, "Boss, we just got the final signature. St. Luke Hospital has signed the exclusive data partnership with Vanguard. We have full access to their internal billing and personnel records starting December 27th. The board wants you to personally oversee the integration because of the sensitivity of the data." I stared at the phone. St. Luke Hospital. The hospital where Dr. Caleb Sterling was a star surgeon. The hospital where he was apparently about to be promoted. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. I typed back a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. Confirmed. Prepare the audit team. I want a full deep dive into the surgical department first. Flag any irregularities. And Malik set up a meeting with the chief of surgery for the 27th. Tell him I will handle the VIP onboarding personally. I put the phone down and looked back at the restaurant window. I could see my family laughing. Jasmine was probably telling them about the wedding venue she wanted. My father was probably calculating how much prestige this marriage would bring him at the golf club. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had cleared the board of the pawn. They didn't realize the queen was already in position. I started the car. The engine sputtered a bit before turning over, maintaining the illusion of poverty one last time. I pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. I wasn't going home to a microwave dinner. I was going to my penthouse in the Loop to open a bottle of vintage wine and prepare for a hostile takeover. Christmas was going to be very interesting this year. Not the way they planned, but exactly the way it needed to be. I turned my gaze toward the two people who had brought me into this world, expecting them to put a stop to this madness. My mother Beatrice was sitting there playing with her pearl necklace. It was a nervous tic she had developed years ago whenever she was uncomfortable or about to deliver bad news. But this time she did not look uncomfortable. She looked resolved. She looked like a general deciding which soldier to sacrifice for the greater good of the war. "Mom, are you hearing this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to remain stoic. "She is talking about banning me from our family holiday. She is talking about erasing me because my car is old." Beatrice stopped fiddling with the pearls. She smoothed the napkin on her lap and finally met my eyes. Her gaze was not warm. It was calculating. It was the look of a woman who had spent her whole life trying to climb the social ladder and was terrified of slipping back down. "Aaliyah, listen to your sister," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, practical tone that chilled me to the bone. "Jasmine is right. This is not just a dinner. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Caleb is not just a boyfriend. He is a ticket to a world we have always deserved to be part of. He comes from old money, Aaliyah. His father sits on the board of the symphony. We cannot risk messing this up." She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. "Do not be selfish. You have to understand how this looks from the outside. When you walk into a room with your hoodie and your tired eyes, you bring the energy down. You look like a liability. You lower the market value of this family. We need to present a united front of success, and unfortunately, you do not fit that picture right now. Your presence simply depreciates the brand Jasmine is trying to build. Depreciates the brand." My own mother was talking about me like I was a dented car on a used lot. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at my father, hoping for a shred of defense. Elijah was a man who preached about family loyalty every Sunday. He was the one who always said blood was thicker than water. Surely he would not stand for this. "Dad, say something," I pleaded. "Tell her this is insane. Tell her you want your daughter at Christmas." Elijah refused to look at me. He was busy cutting his steak, focused intently on the knife slicing through the meat. He took a long sip of his wine, avoiding my gaze completely. He cleared his throat, a sound that used to command respect, but now just sounded pathetic and cowardly. "Your mother is right, Aaliyah," he said, addressing his plate rather than me. "It is better if you do not come. We have worked too hard to get to where we are. We cannot let your lack of ambition drag us back. Do not embarrass us. Just stay home this year. Maybe next year, if you get your life together, we can talk. But for now, let your sister have her moment without you ruining the aesthetic." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. They had not just sided with Jasmine. They had validated her cruelty. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the cancer they were cutting out to save the healthy tissue. They looked at me with shame, while I sat there silently running a company worth more than their entire cumulative existence. The betrayal was absolute. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. It was a dry, hollow sound that seemed to suck the air out of the space between us. I looked from my father, who was still studying his steak like it held the secrets of the universe, to my mother, who was smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. They were not even looking at me. They had pronounced my sentence, and now they just wanted the convict to walk herself to the electric chair so they would not have to watch. "So that is it then," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm raging inside my chest. "I am just garbage to you. I am just the trash that needs to be taken out to the curb before the important guests arrive. I am the stain on the carpet you are trying to hide under the rug. Is that really what it comes down to after 32 years? I saw Jasmine's jaw tighten. Her eyes flashed with a sudden intense fury. She did not like hearing the ugly truth spoken out loud. She wanted me to disappear quietly, to fade into the background like I always did. My refusal to just accept her insults was pushing her over the edge. "Stop making this about you," she hissed, leaning over the table. "You always play the victim, Aaliyah. It is pathetic. You are not a victim. You are a lazy, unmotivated anchor dragging us all down. And yes, if you want to use that word, then fine. Compared to Caleb, you are trash. He saves lives. He builds things. He matters. You sit in your apartment and do nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing." As she screamed the last word, she grabbed her water glass. It was a heavy crystal goblet filled with ice water and a slice of lemon. In one fluid, violent motion, she jerked her arm forward. The cold water hit me squarely in the chest, soaking the front of my gray hoodie. The ice cubes bounced off my collarbone and clattered onto the floor. A few drops splashed onto my face, running down my cheek like false tears. The restaurant went silent. I could feel every eye in the room turning toward our table. The clinking of silverware stopped. The low hum of conversation vanished. For a second, the only sound was the drip of water falling from my clothes onto the expensive carpet. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Not because her daughter had just assaulted her other daughter, but because Jasmine had caused a scene. Elijah finally looked up, his eyes wide with panic, not for me, but for their reputation. Jasmine stood up, breathing hard, her face flushed. She pointed a manicured finger at the door. "Look what you made me do. You are a disaster, Aaliyah. Everywhere you go, you bring chaos. Just get out. Get out of here before you ruin anything else. If you have a single shred of dignity left, you will walk out that door and you will not contact us until after the holidays. Do not text. Do not call. And for the love of God, do not show up at the house. Know your place." I sat there for a moment, feeling the ice water soak through to my skin. It was freezing, but it woke me up. It washed away the last lingering hope I had that this was just a misunderstanding. This was not a family. This was a shark tank, and I was the bait. I slowly wiped a drop of water from my chin. I looked at Jasmine standing there in her counterfeit luxury, shaking with rage and entitlement. I looked at my parents shrinking away from the scandal. And I realized they were right. I did not belong here. But not for the reasons they thought. I did not gasp. I did not cry. I simply let the ice water drip from my chin onto the gray fabric of my hoodie, darkening the material like a spreading bruise. In that moment, the last fragile thread connecting me to these people finally snapped. It was not a loud break like a bone fracturing. It was a quiet, final severance, like a power cord being pulled from the wall. The hum of anxiety, that had been the background noise of my entire life, suddenly went silent. I looked at Jasmine, panting with her performative rage, her chest heaving as if she were the victim here. Then I looked at my parents. They were shrinking into their high-backed chairs, terrified that the waiter might approach. They were not worried about their daughter sitting there soaked and humiliated. They were worried about the optics. They were worried about the scene. I stood up slowly. I moved with a deliberate, calm precision that seemed to unsettle them more than any scream could have. I picked up a linen napkin from the table and dabbed at the water on my face. I did not rush. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing me run. I stared directly into Jasmine's eyes and saw a flicker of doubt replace the fury. She expected me to beg or to fight back with tears. She did not know how to handle the void. I reached into the front pocket of my jeans. My hand closed around the money clip I always carried for these specific occasions. It was filled with fives and tens crumpled and worn. To them, this wad of cash looked like my rent money. It looked like my grocery budget for the month. It looked like a struggle. To me, it was less than what my passive investments earned in the time it took to blink. I pulled the stack out. It was thick and messy, a stark contrast to the elegant crystal and silver on the table. I tossed the money onto the pristine white tablecloth. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the untouched bread basket. The bills splayed out slightly dirty green paper against the starch white linen. My father flinched as if I had thrown a weapon. My mother stared at the cash with a mixture of greed and disgust. "That covers my water," I said, my voice completely void of emotion. It was not angry. It was not sad. It was dead. "And consider the rest a tip for the show. You guys really outdid yourselves tonight. I hope Caleb appreciates the performance as much as I did. Good luck with the casting call." I did not wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked away. The silence in the restaurant was heavy and suffocating. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room pressing against my back. The other diners were staring, forks hovering halfway to their mouths. I could hear their whispers starting before I even reached the hostess stand. "Look at that girl. Look at how she treated her family. Poor people having to deal with such a mess." I kept my head high, my eyes fixed on the brass handle of the exit door. I did not look down. I did not hunch my shoulders. I walked with the stride of a CEO, not the shuffle of a failure. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors, the sounds of the restaurant, the clinking glass, the low chatter, the soft jazz faded instantly. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, leaving the warmth and the toxicity behind me. I had left the burden at table 4. I walked into the night not as the daughter they were ashamed of, but as the storm they never saw coming. The Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow the moment the heavy brass doors swung shut behind me. Snow was beginning to fall, fat, wet flakes that melted instantly against the pavement, turning the sidewalk into a mirror of black ice. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering violently. It was not just the temperature, it was the adrenaline crash. My body was reacting to the trauma of being orphaned by my own parents while they were still alive. I stood there for a moment on the corner of Michigan Avenue, watching the happy holiday shoppers rush by with their bags of gifts and their cheerful faces. They had no idea that 10 feet away inside that warm, glowing restaurant, a family had just amputated a limb and ordered dessert. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my jeans. It was a long, sustained buzz indicating a priority call. I pulled it out, my fingers numb and red from the cold. The screen lit up with the name Malik. He was my right-hand man, the vice president of operations at Vanguard, and the only person who knew where the bodies were buried because he usually helped me dig the graves. I slid the bar to answer. Boss Malik's voice was crisp and efficient, cutting through the noise of the traffic. "I hope I am not interrupting your family dinner. I know you said you were going dark for the evening." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that vanished into the wind. "There is no dinner, Malik. I have been excused. What do you have for me?" There was a pause on the line, then the distinct sound of typing on a mechanical keyboard. "The ink is dry. St. Luke Hospital just countersigned the exclusive data integration contract. We have full administrative access to their entire internal server effective December 27th. We are talking billing records, personnel files, disciplinary hearings, the works. The board wants to know where you want to start the audit." I froze. St. Luke Hospital. The name echoed in my mind, bouncing off the frozen buildings. That was Caleb's kingdom. That was the place where he played God. That was the institution he used to make my sister feel superior to me. And now, as of 2 days after Christmas, I would own the keys to his castle. I would see every prescription he wrote, every surgery he booked, and every dollar he billed. The universe did not just open a door, it handed me a sledgehammer. I turned back toward the restaurant. Through the large plate glass window etched with festive frost, I could see table 4. My father was pouring wine. My mother was laughing at something Jasmine said, probably a joke at my expense. They looked relieved. They looked unburdened. They thought they had solved their problem by kicking me out into the cold. They had no idea that they had just handed me the weapon that would end them. Malik was still on the line waiting. Aaliyah, did you hear me? We need a target list. The algorithm needs a focal point to start the deep dive. Who do you want to process first? I watched Jasmine toast to her future. I watched the way she preened, confident that her surgeon boyfriend made her untouchable. I brought the phone closer to my lips, my eyes never leaving my family. I did not just want Caleb. I wanted the pride that fueled them. I wanted the arrogance that blinded them. I wanted to burn the entire false narrative to the ground. Start with Dr. Sterling. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the wind. But Malik, do not stop there. Run the diagnostics on everyone associated with him. I want to know who enabled him. I want to know who protected him. Who do I want to process first? Everyone. 2 days after my family publicly executed our relationship in the middle of a French restaurant, my phone rang. I was sitting in my home office surrounded by 3 curved monitors displaying the internal financial architecture of St. Luke Hospital, but to the person on the other end of the line, I was presumably sitting on a futon counting pennies. The caller ID flashed the name Jasmine. I stared at it for a long moment. A rational person would have blocked the number. A healing person would have ignored it. But I was neither of those things right now. I was a strategist gathering intelligence. I swiped to answer and put it on speaker. Hey sis, Jasmine? S voice floated through the air, sugary and bright. It was a tone she usually reserved for asking favors or manipulating our parents. It was so fake it almost made my teeth ache. I hope you are not still sulking about the other night. You know how mom gets when she is stressed. We just want everything to be perfect for Caleb. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my legs. I am not sulking, Jasmine, I said calmly, my eyes scanning a line of code that suggested Dr. Sterling had authorized a questionable purchase of spinal implants. I am busy. What do you want? Jasmine let out a dramatic sigh, the kind that was supposed to signal she was the long-suffering martyr dealing with a difficult child. You are always so defensive, Aaliyah. I am calling to give you a chance to be involved. I know you are hurt that you cannot come to the dinner. I know you feel left out of this huge milestone for our family. So I wanted to give you a way to contribute, to make you feel like you are still part of the team. I stopped typing. The audacity was truly breathtaking. She was offering me a consolation prize for being banished. Go on, I said, my voice neutral. Well, Caleb mentions that he loves vintage Bordeaux, specifically the 1996 vintage. It is very rare and very sophisticated, just like him. Now, obviously, mom and dad are covering the food and the decor, which is costing them a fortune. And I am spending every dime I have on my dress and hair to look the part of a surgeon's wife. So we thought it would be a nice gesture if you covered the wine. I blinked. You want me to buy you wine? Not just wine. Jasmine corrected, her tone hardening slightly, dropping the sweet facade. Expensive wine. I found a bottle at a specialty shop downtown. It is $2,000. I know you have that little savings account, Aaliyah, that unemployment fund or whatever you call it, that you have been hoarding from your odd jobs. You are always bragging about being frugal. Well, now is the time to spend it on something that actually matters. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Let me get this straight. You kicked me out of the dinner because I look poor, but you want to raid my bank account to impress a man who presumably has enough money to buy his own vineyard. Jasmine made a noise of frustration. Do not twist this around. You are not eating the food, Aaliyah. You are not using the electricity. You are not taking up space. So the money you would have cost us by being there, you can just transfer to me instead. Consider it your admission ticket to being a good sister. If you cannot be there in person, you can at least send your money. It is the least you can do after the scene you caused at the restaurant. $2,000. Transfer it by noon or do not bother claiming you care about this family. The logic was so twisted it was almost art. She wanted to tax me for my own exclusion. She wanted me to finance the very event I was banned from. It was parasitic. It was predatory. And it was exactly the ammunition I needed to ensure I felt zero guilt about what was coming next. No. I said the words softly, but it carried the weight of a judge slamming down a gavel in a silent courtroom. I am not sending you $2,000, Jasmine. I am not buying wine for a party where my presence is considered pollution. If Caleb wants vintage Bordeaux, he can buy it with his surgeon's salary. And if you want to impress him, you can do it with your own money, not mine. Find another sponsor for your fantasy life, because the Bank of Aaliyah is permanently closed. The silence on the other end lasted for a heartbeat before it shattered. The sugary tone evaporated instantly, replaced by a voice so full of venom it sounded like a demon had clawed its way up her throat. The mask of the sweet sister concerned about family unity dropped, and the real Jasmine, the one driven by insecurity and greed, stepped into the light. "You are just jealous, aren't you?" she screamed, her voice distorting over the speakerphone. "You cannot stand it. You cannot stand that I won. You cannot stand that I am the one marrying the doctor and living the dream while you rot in your little apartment with nothing. You want me to fail. That is what this is. You are sabotaging me because you are miserable and alone, and you want everyone else to be miserable too. You want me to end up like you, pathetic and single, driving a piece of junk car and counting coupons." She took a breath, but she wasn't done. She was just reloading. "Well, guess what, Aaliyah? It is not going to work. Caleb loves me. He sees my value even if you don't. He knows I come from quality even if my sister is trash. And do not think there won't be consequences for this. I am going to tell Mom. I am going to tell Dad. I will make sure they write you out of the will completely. You won't get a dime. Not the house, not the jewelry, nothing. When they die, you will be left with exactly what you deserve, which is absolutely nothing. You will die poor, just like you lived." I sat there in my Italian leather chair, staring at the skyline of Chicago through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. I almost laughed. The will, the grand inheritance they dangled over my head like a carrot. My parents owned a mortgaged house filled with depreciating furniture and a jewelry box full of costume pearls. Their retirement savings were non-existent because they spent everything trying to look rich for the neighbors. I made more in interest in a single week than their entire estate was worth. But to Jasmine, that imaginary fortune was everything. It was her leverage. It was her weapon. She thought she was threatening me with poverty when she was really just threatening me with her own delusion. "Do whatever you have to do, Jasmine," I said, my voice ice cold. "But listen to me very carefully. Do not call me again. Do not text me. Do not come looking for me when your house of cards falls down, because it will fall down, and when it does, I won't be there to catch you." I ended the call before she could scream another word. I didn't just hang up. I blocked the number, then I blocked my parents. The silence that filled my office wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a tumor being removed. They had played their last card. They had fired their last shot. Now the battlefield was clear. I turned back to my monitors where the data from St. Luke Hospital was starting to populate. It was time to go to work. I decided to step out of my ivory tower for one specific errand. My executive team at Vanguard had worked 80-hour weeks to secure the St. Luke contract, and I believed in rewarding loyalty. I pulled my hood up and walked into the Rolex boutique on the Magnificent Mile. The security guard glanced at my sneakers, but he did not stop me. He knew better. I had been here last year to buy a vintage Daytona for a retiring board member. The store manager, Jean-Pierre, spotted me immediately and rushed over, ignoring a man in a $3,000 suit, to greet the woman in the faded denim. I pointed to the display case. "I need 5 submariners and 1 Platinum Day date. Wrap them individually, please." I paid with my black card, the heavy titanium clicking satisfyingly against the glass counter. Jean-Pierre handed me the heavy green bags, his smile wide and genuine. I added a few leather briefcases from the designer store next door, filling my arms with about $60,000 worth of merchandise. It was heavy, but it felt good. It felt like power. I stepped out into the main atrium of the mall, intending to head straight to the parking garage. That was when I heard it. That shrill, performative laugh. I froze. 50 feet away, coming down the escalator like royalty descending from a throne, was my family. Jasmine was clinging to the arm of a tall white man with sandy blonde hair and the kind of jawline that looked like it was purchased. Dr. Caleb Sterling. My parents trailed behind them, carrying shopping bags like hired help. Panic surged through me. Not fear of them, but fear of losing my advantage. If they saw these bags, if they saw the Rolex crown and the designer logos, the game would be over. Jasmine would know I had money. She would pivot instantly from scorn to solicitation. The trap I was setting relied entirely on their belief that I was destitute. I looked around frantically. There was a large potted fern near a seating area. Without thinking, I ducked behind it and shoved the expensive bags behind the planter. I stripped off my gloves and messed up my hair, trying to look as disheveled as possible. I needed to look like the failure they believed I was. I needed to protect the lie to ensure the truth would hurt them more later. I tried to become invisible, to melt into the river of holiday shoppers and disappear, but fate is never that kind. Caleb stopped abruptly in the middle of the atrium. His eyes locked onto me, and it felt less like being seen and more like being dissected. He did not extend a hand. He did not offer a polite smile. He did not even acknowledge my existence as another human being sharing the same space. He looked at me with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a bacteria culture that had gone bad. He was even taller than I expected, looming over Jasmine in a bespoke camel hair coat that probably cost more than my first car. His Italian leather boots gleamed under the mall lights. He radiated the kind of effortless, unearned confidence that is the birthright of old money. He looked like he owned the air he breathed and was simply tolerating the rest of us using it. He leaned down toward Jasmine, but he made no effort to lower his voice. He wanted me to hear this. He needed me to know exactly where I fell on the social ladder he had constructed in his mind. "Is this the sister?" he asked, his tone dripping with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "The one with the issues you told me about?" Jasmine went rigid beside him. She looked at me, and I could see the sheer panic in her eyes. She was terrified I would speak. She was terrified I would claim her as blood. She gave a jerky, quick nod like a puppet on a string. "Yes, that is Aaliyah." Caleb made a show of looking around the high-end atrium, taking in the marble floors and the designer storefronts, then bringing his gaze back to my faded jeans and oversized hoodie. He smirked. It was a small, cruel twisting of his lips that said everything without saying a word. "She looks like she took a wrong turn on her way to the welfare office. Are you sure she is actually related to you, Jasmine? You look like royalty, and she looks like she is waiting for food stamps." I felt the heat rush into my cheeks. It was not shame. It was a cold, burning fury. This man looked at a black woman in casual clothes and immediately saw poverty. He saw a stereotype. He saw someone beneath him. But Caleb was not finished. He glanced over his shoulder at the security guard standing near the entrance of the Louis Vuitton store, then looked back at me with exaggerated concern. He leaned closer to Jasmine, his whisper loud and theatrical, designed for an audience of one. "You might want to check her pockets, babe. Or maybe tell her to leave before security starts paying attention. People dressed like that in a place like this usually have sticky fingers. We do not want a scandal right before my promotion. It would be very inconvenient." Jasmine did not defend me. She did not slap him for calling her sister a thief. She giggled. It was a nervous, sycophantic sound that made my stomach churn. She aligned herself with his cruelty because she thought it made her safe. She thought if she laughed at the pauper, she would get to keep her place as the princess. She had no idea that the woman standing in front of her accused of shoplifting could buy this entire mall and fire every security guard in it before lunch. I stood my ground, my hands curled into fists deep in my pockets, fighting the overwhelming urge to pull out my black card and silence him forever. But I held back. The trap was not ready yet, and when it snapped shut, I wanted it to hurt. My mother Beatrice noticed the curl of Caleb's lip. She saw the way he pulled his expensive camel hair coat tighter around himself, as if my poverty was a contagious disease that could jump across the air gap between us. Panic flared in her eyes instantly. It was not panic for her daughter's dignity or safety. It was panic for the transaction she was trying to close. She moved with a speed that belied her age, rushing forward to put herself physically between me and the golden ticket that was Dr. Caleb Sterling. She did not hug me. She did not whisper an apology. She shoved me. Her manicured hands hit my chest with surprising force, pushing me back toward the potted fern where I had stashed $60,000 worth of luxury watches. "Get away from here, Aaliyah." She hissed, her voice a frantic whisper that carried the weight of a scream. "Go! Just go somewhere else immediately! Can you not see what you are doing? You are making him uncomfortable. You are ruining everything. You are polluting the air just by standing here. Look at him. He is a man of status. He is elite. He does not need to be breathing the same air as someone who looks like they slept in a car. Get out of his sight before you embarrass us further. Polluting the air." The words hit me harder than the physical shove. My own mother, the woman who had carried me for 9 months, looked at me as if I were a toxic fume that needed to be ventilated for the safety of the public. She was not protecting her child. She was protecting the aesthetic. She was guarding the illusion of perfection she had sold to this man, and I was the crack in the foundation that threatened to bring it all down. She looked at me with genuine revulsion, as if my hoodie and jeans were an personal insult to her existence. I stumbled back slightly, my sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the desperation in her eyes, the terror that her lie would be exposed. I saw a woman who would sell her own flesh and blood for a seat at the high table. And behind her I saw Caleb. He was wiping his sleeve as if my proximity had physically soiled him, even though we had not touched. He offered Beatrice a small, approving nod, as if she were a well-trained dog who had successfully chased away a pest. "Good save, Mrs. Vance," he said smoothly, adjusting his cashmere scarf. "We really should be more careful about the neighborhoods we walk through. You never know what kind of riffraff you might pick up." Beatrice beamed under his praise, her chest puffing out with pride. "I am so sorry, Caleb," she said, fawning over him, turning her back to me completely. "Please forgive the interruption. We can go to the VIP lounge now. I hear they have excellent champagne." I stood there frozen, not by fear, but by a cold, absolute clarity. My eyes met the back of my mother's head one last time. There was no love there. There was no recognition. There was only relief that I was being removed. I did not cry. I did not scream. My gaze went dead flat and empty. It was the look of a stranger. In that moment, I realized I was no longer her daughter. I was just an obstacle she had successfully cleared. I turned away, my hand brushing against the hidden bags of Rolexes behind the plant. I walked toward the exit, leaving them to their champagne and their delusions. They thought they had discarded me. They had no idea they had just freed me to destroy them without mercy. I drove my rattling Honda Civic through the streets of Chicago, listening to the engines sputter with every stoplight. It was a tedious, noisy ride, but it was part of the camouflage I had perfected over the years. I pulled up to the gated entrance of the Pinnacle, one of the most exclusive residential high-rises in the city. The security guard, a stern-faced man named Marcus, who had seen me in every state, from exhausted to exhilarated, stepped out of his booth. He glanced at the beat-up car and then at my face. His expression softened instantly into a respectful nod. "Good evening, Miss Vance," he said, opening the heavy iron gates without asking for identification. "The private garage is clear for you." I parked the Honda in my designated spot right next to my other vehicles, a matte black G-Wagon and a sleek silver Aston Martin that had probably been driven twice in the last year. I stepped out of the Civic and walked toward the private elevator bank, pressing my thumb against the biometric scanner. The doors slid open with a silent, expensive whoosh that felt like a sigh of relief. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 30 seconds. When the doors opened, I stepped into a different world. The space was vast, modern, and silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city I was slowly conquering. The lights adjusted automatically to my presence, a soft, warm glow illuminating the Italian marble floors and the original Basquiat hanging in the foyer. This was my sanctuary, the fortress I had built with the bricks thrown at me by people who thought I was nothing. I walked into the master suite and stripped off the gray hoodie that smelled like humiliation and the jeans that felt like a costume. I threw them into a hamper, not caring where they landed. I walked into the walk-in closet, a room larger than my parents' entire living room. I pulled on a silk robe that cost more than my sister's wedding dress budget. I let my hair down, shaking out the tension of the day, feeling the silk settle against my skin like a second layer of armor. I walked to the climate-controlled wine cellar, bypassing the shelves of ordinary vintage, and reached for a bottle of Chateau Margaux 1996. It was worth $20,000. 10 times the price of the bottle Jasmine had demanded I buy for her little party. I opened it with a practiced hand, pouring the deep red liquid into a crystal glass. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. It tasted like patience. I walked out to the balcony, the cold air biting at my skin through the silk, but I did not feel it. I looked down at the city lights, thousands of tiny sparks in the darkness. Somewhere down there, my family was probably still celebrating their small petty triumph. They were drinking cheap champagne and congratulating themselves on getting rid of the dead weight. They had no idea that the dead weight was looking down on them from the top of the world, holding a glass of wine that cost more than their car, and planning their absolute destruction. This was my reality. This was the life I had built while they were busy judging my shoes. And tomorrow, I was going to use every ounce of this power to remind them exactly who I was. I took another sip of wine and smiled. The game was just beginning. December 24th arrived with a silence that felt heavy and metallic. In my penthouse overlooking the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan, there were no carols playing. There was no smell of pine or roasting turkey. There was only the low hum of the server room cooling systems and the blue light of 3 massive monitors casting long shadows across the room. I sat in my ergonomic chair, a glass of water on the desk beside a stack of hard drives. Most people were opening gifts or drinking eggnog. I was preparing for a digital autopsy. My phone lit up on the desk. The screen flashed with a notification from Instagram. I knew what it was before I even looked. Jasmine could never resist a victory lap. She needed the world to know she had won. I picked up the device and swiped the screen. The image loaded in high definition. It was a masterpiece of staging. They were gathered around the fireplace in my parents' living room. Jasmine was wearing a red velvet dress that probably cost her rent money. She was clinging to Caleb's arm like a barnacle. Caleb looked bored but compliant, holding a glass of scotch like a prop. My parents stood on either side of them, beaming with a desperate kind of pride. They looked like they were trying to sell a lifestyle they did not own. The tree behind them was perfectly decorated, but I knew the ornaments were plastic. The caption was the dagger. It read simply, "A perfect Christmas with the people who matter most." Finally, free of the negative energy that holds us back. So grateful for this upgrade. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag surgeon wife life. Hashtag no drama. Negative energy. That was me. I was the negative energy they had exorcised. I stared at the photo, zooming in on their faces. I saw the strain around my father's eyes, probably worrying about how much the dinner cost. I saw the tightness in my mother's smile, probably terrified Caleb would notice the cracks in the ceiling. They were not happy. They were relieved. They were relieved that the reminder of their mediocrity was gone. They thought they had curated a perfect moment by editing me out of the frame. I did not feel sad. I did not feel the sting of rejection that used to send me crying to my room when I was a teenager. I felt a cold, hard resolve. They wanted to remove the negative energy. Fine. I would give them a vacuum. I would give them a void so deep it would swallow them whole. I tossed the phone onto the sofa. The screen went dark. I turned my chair back to the real view. The Vanguard interface was waiting for me. The cursor blinked rhythmically like a heartbeat. I cracked my knuckles and leaned forward. They were celebrating a lie. I was about to uncover the truth. I typed in the command code to initiate the deep scan of the St. Luke Hospital surgical database. The loading bar appeared. "Merry Christmas, Caleb," I whispered to the empty room. "Let us see what you are hiding under that white coat." I pushed the phone across the desk until it hit the far edge of the mahogany surface. The image of their smiling faces slid into the darkness out of reach and out of relevance. I took a deep breath, inhaling the conditioned air of the penthouse. It smelled of ozone and expensive leather, the scent of absolute control. I closed my eyes for a second, visualizing the emotional compartment where I kept my desire for their love. I imagined a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking. That part of me was done. That part of me was offline. Now only the CEO remained. I turned my chair toward the central monitor. It was a massive curved screen that spanned 6 feet. I touched the trackpad, and the system woke up instantly. The Vanguard Health Solutions logo pulsed in the center of the black screen, a stylized V that looked like a bird of prey diving. This was my creation. This was the algorithm that had terrified insurance companies and saved hospitals millions. It did not care about social status or vintage wine or expensive coats. It cared about patterns. It cared about anomalies. And tonight it was going to care about Dr. Caleb Sterling. I placed my hand on the biometric scanner. A soft green light swept under my palm. Identity confirmed. "Welcome, Administrator Vance." The voice was cool and synthetic. I typed in my personal override code, a string of characters that bypassed the standard user interface and took me directly into the root directory. The screen filled with lines of cascading code streams of data flowing like digital blood through the veins of the network. I opened the command console. The cursor blinked, waiting for instruction. I did not hesitate. My fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with the speed of a concert pianist. I typed the target parameters. Client ID St. Luke Hospital. Department Neurosurgery. Personnel. All attending surgeons. Date range. Last 24 months. I hit enter. The screen shifted. A map of the hospital's digital infrastructure appeared. It was a complex web of billing servers, patient records, and inventory logs. Most people saw a hospital as a place of healing. I saw it as a ledger. I saw it as a series of transactions. And somewhere in those transactions, there was a lie waiting to be found. I could feel it. Men like Caleb, men who treated people like dirt in public, usually had even dirtier secrets in private. Their arrogance was always their Achilles heel. They thought they were too important to be watched. They thought the rules did not apply to them because they wore white coats and drove German cars. I narrowed the search parameters. I typed in the specific query code focusing on high-value implantable devices and surgical hardware. These were the items that cost thousands of dollars a screw. The items that were easy to mark up, easy to over-order, and easy to disappear. I linked the inventory logs to the billing department. I cross-referenced the surgeon schedules with the vendor supply lists. "Initiate deep scan," I whispered. On the screen, a progress bar appeared. It moved slowly, digesting terabytes of data in seconds. The fans in the server room down the hall whirred to life, a low roar that sounded like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. The hunt had begun. I leaned back in my chair, watching the data stream. I was not just looking for a mistake. I was looking for a pattern. I was looking for the fingerprint of greed. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I was going to find it. The screen hummed with the kinetic energy of a digital interrogation. Rows of data scrolled past faster than the human eye could read, but my Vanguard algorithm consumed it all. It was not just looking for math errors. It was looking for behavioral patterns. It was looking for the outliers, the statistical impossibilities that signal fraud. I watched the progress bar inch forward 50%, 70%, 90%. The room was silent, save for the soft whir of the cooling fans. It felt like the calm before a detonation. Then it stopped. The scrolling text froze. A single line of data pulsed in angry crimson against the black background. Alert code 704. Statistical anomaly detected. Inventory mismatch. I leaned forward, the leather of my chair creaking in the silence. I typed a query command isolating the variable. The system zoomed in on a specific category of medical supplies. Spinal fusion hardware, pedicle screws, titanium rods, interbody cages. These were pieces of precision machined metal worth more than gold by weight. They were the bread and butter of neurosurgery, the expensive components that held broken backs together. The billing records showed a massive spike in procurement orders over the last 18 months. According to the ledger, St. Luke Hospital had purchased enough spinal hardware to operate on half the population of Chicago. But when I cross-referenced the inventory logs with the actual surgical schedules and patient outcome reports, the numbers did not add up. The hardware was being bought. It was being paid for by private insurance and Medicare, but it was never going inside patients. It was vanishing into thin air. I felt a cold thrill race down my spine. This was it. This was the ghost in the machine. Someone was ordering expensive equipment, billing the hospital and the insurers, and then likely reselling the inventory on the secondary market, or receiving massive kickbacks from a shell vendor. It was a classic scheme. It was crude. It was bold. And it was effective, if you were arrogant enough to think no one was watching. I entered the command to reveal the authorizing signature for these purchase orders. Who had the clearance to approve millions of dollars in inventory? Who had the ego to think they were untouchable? Who had the access to override the standard procurement caps? The screen refreshed. A digital copy of a signature appeared. It was a flamboyant, looping scrawl, the kind of signature a man practices in the mirror. Beside it was the printed name in bold block letters. Dr. Caleb Sterling, Chief Attending Neurosurgeon. I stared at the name, the man who had called me trash. The man who had looked at my hoodie and saw a shoplifter. The man my family worshipped as a god. He was not just a snob. He was a thief. He was stealing from the sick to pay for his camel haircoats and his vintage wine. He was financing my sister's fantasy life with stolen money. He was building his reputation on a foundation of fraud. I sat back, my heart rate steady and slow. I did not need to guess anymore. I did not need to hope. I had the smoking gun, and it was loaded. I did not stop at the signature. A signature was just the authorization. I needed the destination. I needed to know where the money went after it left the hospital accounts. I initiated a second layer of analysis focusing on the vendors. The purchase orders were made out to companies with generic-sounding names like Apex Medical Supply and Nexus Surgical Solutions. To the untrained eye or an overworked hospital administrator, they looked like standard industry partners. To my algorithm, they looked like black holes. I ran a background check on the corporate registrations. Apex Medical Supply did not have a warehouse. It did not have a distribution center. It had a mailbox at a shipping store in a strip mall 3 towns over. Nexus Surgical Solutions was registered to a residential address in a neighborhood that certainly was not zoned for medical manufacturing. They were shell companies. They were empty vessels created solely to receive checks. I traced the banking routing numbers. The money flowed from St. Luke into these shell accounts, and then it moved again. It was laundered through a series of transfers meant to obscure the source, But digital footprints never truly disappear if you know how to use the right light. I followed the trail to a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands and then back to a domestic holding company. And finally, I found the endpoint. The holding company paid the bills for a specific credit card. I pulled up the monthly statements. It was like reading a diary of my sister's recent social media feed. There was the charge for the bespoke camel hair coat Caleb had worn at the mall. $4,000. There was the lease payment for a brand new Porsche 911 GT3. $3,000 a month. There were charges at the exact high-end boutiques where Jasmine claimed to shop. A $5,000 handbag. A $2,000 bottle of wine from the vintage cellar downtown. I sat back and let the numbers wash over me. $1.5 million. In just 2 years, Dr. Caleb Sterling had embezzled $1.5 million from the hospital to fund a lifestyle he could not actually afford. He was not rich. He was a criminal. He was stealing from his own patients from the insurance premiums of working-class people just so he could play the aristocrat. The irony was suffocating. My family had ostracized me because they thought I was a financial liability. They thought I was poor. They thought I would drag them down. Meanwhile, they were pinning all their hopes and dreams on a man who was actively committing federal wire fraud. Jasmine was walking around wearing evidence. Every gift he gave her, every dinner he paid for, was fruit of a poisonous tree. I looked at the total sum on the screen. 1.5 million. It was a lot of money to most people. To me, it was a rounding error in my quarterly projections. But to the FBI, it was a 20-year sentence. I compiled the data. I exported the bank statements, the shell company registrations, the inventory logs, and the forged purchase orders. I organized them into a single encrypted file. I named it the Sterling Audit. I checked the time. It was 3 in the morning on Christmas Day. While my family slept dreaming of their ascension into high society, I printed out their destruction. The printer hummed in the quiet office, spitting out page after page of incriminating evidence. I picked up the stack of warm paper. It was heavy. It felt like justice. I placed it in a leather portfolio. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for him to walk into the cage. December 26th dawned gray and slushy. The post-holiday hangover hung over the city, but inside my penthouse the air was crisp with anticipation. I was not nursing a headache or cleaning up wrapping paper. I was reviewing the final dossier. The physical evidence was arranged on my desk in neat stacks. Every fraudulent invoice, every laundered transaction, every lie. It was a beautiful mosaic of guilt. My phone chimed on the marble countertop. It was a notification from Jasmine. I picked it up expecting an apology, or maybe a request for money now that the holiday was over. Instead, I saw a photograph that made my lips curl into a humorless smile. It was a hand. Jasmine's hand, manicured to perfection with long acrylic nails painted a garish red. And on her ring finger sat a diamond the size of a grape. It was gaudy. It was excessive. It was exactly the kind of ring a man buys when he is trying to prove something he is not. I stared at the stone. It caught the light in the photo, fracturing it into 1,000 sparkles. I knew exactly how much that ring cost, because I had seen the credit card charge on the stolen bank statements at 3 a.m. the night before. $45,000. Stolen from the hospital inventory budget. That wasn't just jewelry, it was grand larceny worn as an accessory. Then came the text message. It was a wall of text, breathless and manic. He proposed. It happened last night under the mistletoe. I am officially going to be Mrs. Dr. Caleb Sterling. Can you believe it? I am shaking. This is what winning looks like, Aaliyah. This is what happens when you manifest greatness. I didn't respond immediately. I let the bubbles of her typing appear again. Tomorrow is the biggest day of his career. He has a meeting with the new technology partners at the hospital. He is going to be named Chief of Surgery. He says these tech people are just formalities that he has to charm them to sign the check, but he practically runs the place already. After tomorrow, we will be the power couple of Chicago. I honestly feel bad for you, sis. You will never know what this feels like. You will never reach this level. You are stuck in your little life while I am ascending. Do not worry, though. I will send you an invite to the wedding. Maybe you can sit in the back. I set the phone down gently. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was meeting the tech partners. He was meeting me. He thought he was walking into a coronation. He thought he was going to charm a check out of some faceless corporate entity. He had no idea that the check signer was the girl he called trash in the mall. He had no idea that the hand he was planning to shake was the same one holding the axe. I picked up the phone again. I could have told her. I could have warned her that her fiancé was a criminal and her ring was evidence. But she wouldn't have believed me. She would have called me jealous. She would have called me a saboteur. She needed to see it fall. She needed to watch the tower crumble from the inside. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving slowly and deliberately. Congratulations, Jasmine. Enjoy the moment. Good luck to Caleb tomorrow. I have a feeling it is going to be a day none of us will ever forget. I hit send. Then I turned back to my closet. I pushed aside the hoodies and the jeans. I reached into the back where the garment bag hung. I unzipped it, revealing the white tailored power suit I had commissioned in Milan. It was sharp. It was professional. It was the uniform of an executioner. Tomorrow I wasn't just going to a meeting. I was going to a funeral, and I was going to be the one delivering the eulogy. I placed the phone back on the marble desk face down. The glow of Jasmine's message faded, but the words were branded into my memory. She wanted a day she would never forget. I was going to make sure she got exactly that. I reached for the secure landline on my desk. It was a direct link to my legal and security teams bypassing the cellular networks. I dialed a number I rarely used. It was the direct line to Julian, my general counsel, a man who billed $800 an hour and was worth every penny. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert and professional, despite the early hour. "Good morning, Ms. Vance. Is it happening?" "It is happening," I said, my voice calm. "Initiate the Sterling Protocol. I want the boardroom prepped, the main one on the 45th floor, the one with the glass walls overlooking the lake. I want the blinds open. I want the sun streaming in. I want him to feel like he is standing on top of the world right before I kick the chair out from under him." "Understood," Julian replied. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. "And the guests?" I swiveled my chair to look out at the city covered in a blanket of fresh snow. It looked innocent. It looked clean. It was a lie. "Call Agent Miller at the FBI field office," I instructed. "Tell him I have the package ready. Tell him the subject will be on premises at 900 hours sharp. I want his team in the adjacent conference room, the one with the one-way mirror. I want them to see everything. I want them to hear every lie he tells before he realizes he is caught. And Julian makes sure they are in plain clothes. No windbreakers. No badges visible. I want Dr. Sterling to think he is walking into a coronation, not an indictment. Let him feel safe. Let him get comfortable. I want him to sign the confession with a smile on his face." "Consider it done," Julian said. "And security." I looked at the white suit hanging in the garment bag. It was sharp enough to cut glass. "Clear the executive elevator," I said. "When he arrives with Dr. Lewis, do not make them wait. Do not make them sign a guest log. Escort them directly to the penthouse suite. Treat him like he is the most important person in the building. Feed his ego, Julian. Feed it until it is so bloated it bursts. I want him walking into that room thinking he owns this company. I want the drop to be absolute." I hung up the phone. The silence returned, but it felt different now. It was charged with kinetic energy. I walked over to the garment bag and ran my hand down the fabric of the white suit. Tomorrow I would not be the sister in the hoodie. I would not be the girl waiting for food stamps. I would be the architect of their ruin. I went to the wet bar and poured a glass of water. My hand was steady, my heart rate was slow. Most people would be nervous before destroying their own family. Most people would feel a pang of guilt, but most people hadn't been treated like a contagion by their own mother. Most people hadn't been mocked for their poverty by a thief wearing a $4,000 coat. I took a sip of water. I visualized the layout of the boardroom, the long mahogany table, the single chair at the head. That was my seat. Tomorrow, Caleb would stand on the other side of that table, and for the first time in his life, he would have to look up to see me. I walked into the bedroom to try and get a few hours of sleep. I needed to be rested. I needed to be sharp. Revenge requires precision, and I was not going to miss. December 27th arrived with the crisp, cold brightness of a winter morning in Chicago. Over at my parents' house, the scene was playing out exactly like a coronation. Jasmine later told me that Caleb spent an hour in the bathroom perfecting his hair. He selected his suit with the precision of a general choosing armor. It was a navy blue Italian wool cut slim to show off the physique he maintained with a personal trainer paid for by the hospital vendor kickbacks. He paired it with a silk tie that cost more than my father's first car. He walked into the kitchen where my mother Beatrice was already waiting with a cup of espresso. She treated him not like a guest, but like a deity who had deigned to grace her humble abode. She brushed a speck of invisible lint from his shoulder, her eyes shining with the vicarious power he brought into their lives. Jasmine was hovering nearby, holding his briefcase like it contained nuclear codes. She was beaming. This was the day she had been waiting for. The day her investment in this man finally paid out. Caleb took a sip of the coffee and grimaced slightly. It probably wasn't the single origin bean he preferred, but he tolerated it with the magnanimous air of a king accepting a gift from a peasant. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that I knew for a fact was purchased with funds diverted from the oncology budget. "I have to go," he announced, setting the cup down. "Dr. Lewis is picking me up. We cannot keep the tech geeks waiting. They get nervous if they have to sit still for too long." My father Elijah stood up from the table. He looked at Caleb with a mixture of awe and desperation. "Good luck, son," he said, his voice thick with pride. "Show them who is boss. Make sure they know they are dealing with the best surgeon in the city." Caleb laughed. It was a low, throaty sound of absolute confidence. "Do not worry, Elijah. I am not going there to negotiate. I am going there to collect. These tech companies think they hold the keys because they have the servers and the data. They do not understand how the real world works. They are just plumbers. They build the pipes, but I control the water." He adjusted his cufflinks, catching the light. "After this meeting, I won't just be a surgeon. I will be the king of St. Luke. I will control the budget, the personnel, and the future of that hospital. And these tech partners, Vanguard, whatever they are called, they are just going to be my tools. I will use them to streamline the revenue and cut the dead weight. They work for me now. They just do not know it yet." Jasmine kissed his cheek, leaving a smudge of lipstick that he immediately wiped off. "You are going to crush them, baby," she squealed. "Call me the second you are done. We need to book the venue for the engagement party." "I will call you when I am the boss," Caleb promised. He picked up his briefcase and walked out the door, stepping into the cold morning air. He thought he was walking toward his throne. He had no idea he was walking directly into a guillotine. He did not know that the tech plumber he despised was actually the architect of the building he was standing in. And he certainly did not know that the King of St. Luke was about to be dethroned by the Queen of Vanguard. The black town car glided to a halt in front of the Vanguard Tower. It was a monolith of obsidian glass and steel that seemed to pierce the winter sky, standing apart from the surrounding architecture like a god among mortals. Caleb stepped out onto the heated pavement, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He looked up, shading his eyes against the glare of the sun reflecting off the massive structure. For a split second, his mask of indifference slipped. His mouth opened slightly in genuine awe. St. Luke Hospital was prestigious, but it was old money. It was brick and ivy and history. This building was different. This was raw, unadulterated power made physical. It was the kind of wealth that did not just whisper, it screamed. Dr. Lewis scrambled out of the other side of the car looking nervous. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time that morning, his eyes darting around the plaza. He knew the stakes. He knew that St. Luke needed this partnership to survive the next fiscal year. He looked at Caleb with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Try to be diplomatic," Sterling Lewis hissed as they walked toward the revolving doors. "These tech people are not like us. They do not care about medical pedigree. They care about data and efficiency. Do not talk down to them." Caleb laughed, a short, dismissive sound as he buttoned his $4,000 coat. "Relax, Arthur. You are sweating. It is just a building. It is just a company. They built a nice glass box, but they are still just service providers. We are the talent. Without us, this building is just an empty shell. I know how to handle these types. They are desperate for validation from the medical community." They pushed through the heavy glass doors and entered the lobby. It was cavernous with ceilings that soared 3 stories high. A massive digital waterfall cascaded down one wall, the water reacting to the movement of people walking by. The air smelled of white tea and money. The security desk was a slab of black marble, manned by 3 guards who looked more like Secret Service agents than rent-a-cops. Caleb scanned the room, his eyes calculating the cost of everything he saw. He was impressed, but he would never admit it. He needed to maintain the upper hand. He turned to Dr. Lewis with a smirk. "It is a bit much, isn't it?" he muttered loud enough for the nearby receptionist to hear. "Trying too hard to look futuristic. I bet the CEO is overcompensating for something." Lewis looked horrified, but Caleb just chuckled. "I can picture him now." Caleb continued, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Some ancient white guy from Silicon Valley. Probably 70 years old with a bad spray tan and a turtleneck trying to hide his neck waddle. He probably thinks putting a digital waterfall in the lobby makes him a visionary. I have dealt with dozens of men like him. They have all the money, but they have zero taste and even less understanding of actual medicine. I will walk in there, throw around some Latin medical terms, compliment his golf game, and we will walk out with a blank check." He strode toward the security desk with the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire adult life. He did not see a fortress. He saw an ATM. He did not realize that the building was not designed to impress him. It was designed to process him. He thought he was the shark entering the water. He had no idea he was just the chum. Caleb marched up to the massive slab of black marble that served as the security desk. Behind it sat a woman who looked to be in her late 50s. She was wearing a simple Vanguard polo shirt, and her graying hair was pulled back into a severe bun. She was typing on a tablet with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. To Caleb, she was just another invisible cog in the machine. She was a gatekeeper whose only purpose was to open the door for his greatness. "Excuse me," he said, tapping his platinum credit card on the marble surface to get her attention. "We are here for the 9 o'clock meeting with the CEO, Dr. Caleb Sterling and Dr. Arthur Lewis. Notify them we have arrived." The woman looked up over the rim of her glasses. Her eyes were dark, sharp, and completely unimpressed by the $4,000 suit standing in front of her. She did not jump to attention. She did not fawn. She simply finished typing her sentence before setting the tablet down. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Please take a seat in the waiting area. I will notify the executive office. Can I get you some water or coffee while you wait?" "Coffee," Caleb said immediately, not bothering to look at her as he checked his reflection in the polished brass of a desk lamp. "Black. And make sure it is hot. I do not want the lukewarm sludge you people usually serve in the break room. I need caffeine, not colored water." Dr. Lewis winced at the tone, but said nothing. The woman stood up slowly. She walked over to a sleek coffee station set into the alcove behind the desk. She poured a cup and brought it back, setting it down on a coaster in front of Caleb. Caleb picked it up without a word of thanks. He took a sip and immediately spat it back into the cup, making a theatrical show of disgust. He slammed the cup down hard enough that brown liquid sloshed over the rim and stained the pristine marble counter. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. "This is tepid. I asked for hot coffee. Is it really that difficult to follow a simple instruction?" I am about to walk into a meeting that will determine the financial future of this entire company, and you are serving me dishwater. Do you not know how to do your job? The woman did not flinch. She did not apologize or scramble to clean up the mess. She stood very still, her hands clasped in front of her, looking at him with an expression that was hard to read. I can brew a fresh pot, sir, she said, but it will take a few minutes. I do not have a few minutes, Caleb barked, wiping his mouth with a silk handkerchief. I have a schedule. You know what, forget it. Just get me a water, and try not to screw that up. It is unbelievable. They spend millions on digital waterfalls and marble floors, but they hire incompetents to man the front desk. What is your name? I want to make sure I mention this to your boss when I get upstairs. My name is Sarah, the woman said. Well, Sarah, you might want to start updating your resume, Caleb sneered, turning his back on her. Because once I sign this contract, I am going to make sure the staffing standards in this building get a serious overhaul. Efficiency starts at the front door. He walked away, adjusting his tie, feeling righteous and powerful. He sat down next to Dr. Lewis, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the upholstery. You did not have to do that, Lewis hissed. She is just the receptionist. She is the face of the company, Caleb replied loud enough for her to hear. If the face is incompetent, the brain usually is too. It is a power move, Arthur. You have to establish dominance early. You have to let them know you are not someone who accepts mediocrity. Behind the desk, Sarah watched him. She did not look like a receptionist fearing for her job. She looked like a judge passing a death sentence. She picked up her tablet and tapped a few keys, sending a direct message to the secure server in the penthouse suite. Subject: Dr. Caleb Sterling. Behavioral assessment. Status: hostile and abusive. Hi. Recommendation: termination with extreme prejudice. Caleb did not know that Sarah was not a receptionist. She was Sarah Vance, the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Aaliyah's aunt. She had built the corporate culture of Vanguard from the ground up. She had fired executives for less than a rude tone, and she had just handed Caleb the shovel he needed to dig his own grave. The doors of the executive elevator slid open with a whisper, revealing an interior that looked less like a transport vessel and more like a private lounge. The walls were paneled in rare obsidian wood, and the floor was covered in plush carpet that swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Dr. Lewis stepped inside first, his movements jerky and nervous. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He pressed the button for the 45th floor, his hand shaking slightly. Caleb sauntered in after him, occupying the center of the space, as if gravity revolved around his navy blue suit. He checked his reflection in the polished brass control panel, adjusting the knot of his tie by a fraction of a millimeter. He hummed a low tune, completely unbothered by the tension radiating off his companion. You need to calm down, Arthur, Caleb said, watching the numbers on the display start to climb. You are vibrating. It is pathetic. You look like a medical student about to take his boards. Pull yourself together, man. We are here to collect a check, not beg for mercy. Dr. Lewis did not stop pacing. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. You do not understand, Sterling. This is not just a check. Vanguard holds the keys to our entire digital infrastructure. They have access to everything: our billing, our patient records, our compliance history. If they decide we are a liability, they can shut us down with a keystroke. They are not just investors. They are the gatekeepers of our survival. We cannot afford to offend them. Caleb laughed, a sharp bark of amusement that bounced off the expensive wood paneling. He turned to face Lewis, a look of genuine pity in his eyes. He reached out and patted the older man's shoulder with a condescension that was almost impressive in its audacity. That is why I am here, Arthur. You worry about the spreadsheets. I will handle the people. These tech guys are all the same. They are socially awkward introverts who spent their high school years playing video games while men like me were captaining the football team. They crave validation from alphas. They want to be close to the real power. And in this world, the real power is the man holding the scalpel, not the man holding the mouse. He turned back to his reflection, smoothing his eyebrows. I have charisma, Arthur. It is a biological fact. When I walk into a room, the energy shifts. People want to please me. They want to be associated with me. This CEO, whoever he is, will be no different. 5 minutes of my charm, a few war stories from the operating room, and he will be eating out of my hand. He will be begging to sign that contract just to keep me in the room. The elevator continued its silent, rapid ascent. Floor 30, floor 35. Caleb watched the numbers tick upward, feeling a sense of destiny. He was rising. He was ascending to the level he had always deserved. He pictured the meeting, the handshake, the admiration in the CEO's eyes, the moment he would text Jasmine to tell her the kingdom was theirs. He did not know that the elevator was not taking him to a throne room. It was taking him to a dissection table. He did not know that the data Dr. Lewis was so terrified of had already been analyzed, categorized, and weaponized. He thought his charisma was a shield. He did not realize that to the woman waiting on the 45th floor, his charm was just another symptom of the disease she was about to cure. "Do not worry, Arthur," Caleb said as the elevator slowed for the final stop. "Just let me do the talking. By noon we will own this place." The bell chimed softly. Floor 45. The doors began to open. Caleb squared his shoulders, put on his winning smile, and stepped forward into the abyss. The elevator doors retracted with a hushed reverence, revealing a corridor that stretched out like the nave of a modern cathedral. The air here was thinner, cooler, and smelled of ozone and absolute power. The floor was a single, seamless slab of polished gray stone that reflected the recessed lighting above. On the walls, framed in heavy silver, were patents, dozens of them. They were not just pieces of paper, they were declarations of ownership over the future of medicine. Caleb stepped out his Italian leather shoes, making a sharp, authoritative click against the stone. He adjusted his jacket, ensuring the silhouette was perfect. He glanced at the framed documents as he walked, not with respect, but with a critical, appraising eye. United States Patent Number 894, Algorithmic Detection of Vascular Anomalies. United States Patent Number 902, Predictive Modeling for Surgical Outcomes. Impressive, Dr. Lewis muttered, his voice hushed as he scurried to keep up. These people own the intellectual property for half the procedures we bill for. We are walking into the belly of the beast sterling. Do you realize the valuation of just the patents in this hallway? Caleb scoffed, waving a manicured hand dismissively. It is just math, Arthur. They own the math. We own the hands. You cannot patent a steady hand. You cannot patent the instinct I have when I am inside a human skull. These are just receipts. They are participation trophies for nerds who could not handle the sight of blood or the pressure of a real operating room. He stopped in front of a large framed photograph halfway down the hall. It was an artistic black and white shot of the company founder taken from a distance during a keynote speech. The figure was on a stage, silhouetted against a massive screen displaying complex nodes of data. The woman in the photo was wearing a sharp, tailored suit, her back straight, her hand raised as if conducting an orchestra. Her face was partially obscured by the dramatic stage lighting and the angle, but there was something about the posture, something about the rigid set of her shoulders that triggered a flicker of recognition in the back of Caleb's mind. He narrowed his eyes, leaning in closer to the glass. He knew that stance. He had seen that specific kind of defiance before. For a second, his mind flashed back to the mall, to the girl in the dirty gray hoodie standing her ground against his insults near the planter. The tilt of the head was identical. But his brain immediately rejected the connection, like a body rejecting a transplant. It was impossible. It was laughable. The girl in the mall was a charity case, a drain on society, who probably stole watches for a living. The woman in this picture was a titan of industry. They could not be the same species, let alone the same person. Probably the CEO's daughter or a diversity hire put on stage for optics, Caleb muttered, turning away from the image with a sneer. She looks like she is lecturing. I hate women who lecture. They always think they know more than they do. Come on, Arthur. Let us go meet the man behind the curtain and get this over with. I have a lunch reservation at 1. He turned his back on the image of his executioner and strode toward the massive double doors at the end of the hall. He checked his reflection in the glass one last time, smoothing a stray hair. He looked perfect. He felt invincible. He reached out and pushed the doors open, ready to claim his kingdom. The double doors made of solid white oak stood before them like the gates to a fortress. They were 12 feet high and adorned with brushed steel handles that looked cold to the touch. Caleb stopped just inches from the threshold. He did not reach for the handle immediately. He paused to savor the moment. This was the precipice. This was the line between the life he had been living and the life he was about to claim. On the other side of this wood was a billionaire CEO who needed a medical savior. Caleb was more than ready to play the part. He turned to Dr. Lewis, who was practically vibrating with anxiety. Lewis was wringing his hands, a nervous habit that Caleb found repulsive. It projected weakness. It projected fear. Caleb grabbed Lewis by the shoulder, his grip firm enough to be painful. "Stop fidgeting, Arthur." Caleb commanded, his voice low and smooth. "You look like a defendant waiting for a verdict. We are not defendants. We are the prize. Stand up straight. Fix your tie. And for the love of God, do not speak unless spoken to. If they ask about the financials, you defer to me. If they ask about the integration timeline, you defer to me. I am the face of this partnership. You are just the paperwork." Lewis nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, Sterling. Just be careful. These people are serious. Serious is good." Caleb smiled, his teeth white and predatory. "Serious people sign big checks. Watch me work, Arthur. Just watch and learn." Caleb turned back to the doors. He adjusted his cufflinks, ensuring the gold caught the light. He smoothed the lapels of his navy suit. He ran his tongue over his teeth to ensure his smile was dazzling. He closed his eyes for a brief second, inhaling deeply through his nose. He filled his lungs with the filtered air of the 45th floor, holding it for a moment before exhaling slowly. It was a centering technique he used before surgery. It slowed his heart rate. It sharpened his focus. It made him feel like a god. He reached out and gripped the cold steel handles. He did not knock. Not. Kings do not knock. He pushed. The heavy doors swung inward on silent hinges, revealing the inner sanctum. The room beyond was bathed in blinding natural light. 2 entire walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a vertigo-inducing view of the Chicago skyline and the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan. The light bounced off the polished mahogany conference table that seemed to stretch on for miles. It was a room designed to intimidate. It was a room designed to make visitors feel small. But Caleb did not feel small. He felt expansive. He felt like he had finally found a stage big enough for his talent. He stepped across the threshold, his chin raised high. He walked with a swagger that said, "I have arrived." He did not look around nervously. He scanned the room with a proprietary air, taking ownership of the space before he had even introduced himself. He was ready to deliver the performance of his life. He was ready to charm, to manipulate, and to conquer. He opened his mouth to speak his opening line, already polished and ready on his tongue. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind them, sealing the room in a vacuum of silence. The conference room was cavernous, a cathedral of glass and steel, suspended 45 stories above the frozen streets of Chicago. The morning sun blasted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the entire space into a blinding box of white light. It was designed to make anyone standing at the entrance feel small, exposed, and vulnerable. But Caleb did not feel small. He felt like he was walking onto a stage that had finally been built to his specifications. He strode across the plush carpet, the heels of his Italian boots sinking deep into the wool. The table was a long expanse of polished mahogany, reflecting the skyline like a dark mirror. At the very far end of that table, silhouetted against the blinding backdrop of the snowy city, sat a single high-backed leather chair. It was turned away from them, facing the window. Caleb suppressed a smirk. The theatrics were almost charming in their cliché. He assumed the CEO was playing a power game, trying to intimidate him with silence and a dramatic view. He imagined an old man sitting there stroking a cat or swirling a brandy snifter like a villain in a bad movie. It was pathetic, really. Real power did not need props. Real power was walking into a room and owning it, which was exactly what Caleb intended to do. He nudged Dr. Lewis, who had frozen a few steps inside the door. "Keep moving, Arthur," Caleb whispered, his voice a low hiss. "Do not look so terrified. It is just a chair." They approached the end of the table, stopping 10 feet away from the silent figure. Caleb adjusted his cufflinks, standing with his feet shoulder-width apart, a stance he had practiced in the mirror to project dominance. He waited for the chair to turn. He waited for the old man to spin around and be dazzled by his presence. But the chair did not move. The figure remained still, staring out at the white void of the lake. Dr. Lewis could not take the silence any longer. He cleared his throat, a nervous, dry sound that echoed in the vast room. He bowed his head slightly, a reflex of submission to the financial authority this room represented. "Madam Chairwoman," Dr. Lewis said, his voice trembling slightly. "We have arrived. I am Dr. Arthur Lewis, the hospital administrator, and this is Dr. Caleb Sterling, our chief of neurosurgery. We are honored that you have taken the time to meet with us personally." Caleb blinked. "Madam Chairwoman." So, it was a woman. The image of the old man in the turtleneck vanished, replaced instantly by a new strategy. A woman was even better. He knew how to handle women. He had charmed his way into Jasmine's bed and her family's good graces with nothing but a smile and a few compliments. If the CEO was a woman, she would be susceptible to his looks, his confidence, and his alpha energy. He relaxed his shoulders slightly, shifting his weight to one hip. This was going to be easier than he thought. He would play the charming rogue, the brilliant but dangerous surgeon. She would be eating out of his hand before the coffee was served. He stepped forward, cutting in front of Dr. Lewis. He pitched his voice to be deep, smooth, and commanding. "A pleasure to meet you, Madam Chair," he said, injecting a warm familiarity into the formal title. "You have a magnificent view. But I must say, looking at a frozen city is far less interesting than looking at the future of medicine, which is exactly what Dr. Lewis and I have brought you today. Why do we not turn that chair around so we can start making history together?" He smiled, his winning smile, waiting for the turn. He was ready to dazzle. He was ready to win. He had no idea that the woman in the chair was not admiring the view. She was counting the seconds. She was savoring the silence before the storm. And she was smiling too, but it was the smile of a predator who had just heard the trap snap shut. The leather chair began to rotate. It moved with a slow hydraulic hiss, a sound that seemed deafening in the silent room. Caleb stood there, his weight resting on one hip, his charming smile plastered on his face, waiting to dazzle the stranger he was about to manipulate. He watched the back of the chair disappear, revealing the figure inch by inch. First came the legs crossed at the knee, clad in pristine white fabric, then the hands resting calmly on the armrests, fingers steeped in a pyramid of absolute control. And finally, the face. The chair locked into place, facing them directly. The smile froze on Caleb's lips. It did not fade naturally, it shattered. It cracked and fell away, leaving his mouth hanging open in a silent scream of disbelief. Sitting before him was not an old man in a turtleneck. It was not a stranger. It was Aaliyah. But it was not the Aaliyah he knew. It was not the woman in the oversized gray hoodie he had mocked at the mall just 2 days ago. It was not the sister he had accused of being a shoplifter. This woman was a stranger wearing his victim's face. She was wearing a tailored white suit that fit her like a second skin, the sharp lines of the blazer accentuating her posture. Her hair, which had been messy and loose at the mall, was now pulled back into a severe, elegant bun, revealing the sharp architecture of her cheekbones. She wore no jewelry save for a simple platinum watch on her wrist, but she radiated a brilliance that made the diamonds in the jewelry store look like cheap glass. Her eyes were dark and bottomless, fixing him with a gaze that stripped him bare. There was no warmth in them, no family recognition, only the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor she was about to excise. Caleb felt his world tilt on its axis. His brain scrambled to make sense of the visual input. It was a glitch in the matrix. A hallucination brought on by stress. This could not be Aaliyah. Aaliyah was poor. Aaliyah was a failure. Aaliyah was the dirt on his shoe. This woman was a queen sitting on a throne of steel and glass, looking down at him as if he were an insect. He blinked rapid and hard, trying to clear his vision. But she did not disappear. She did not transform back into the girl in the hoodie. She just sat there watching him panic. He felt the blood drain from his face, pooling in his feet, leaving him lightheaded. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. "You," he whispered. The word escaped his throat like a wheeze. It was not a question. It was a confession of impossibility. Dr. Lewis, who had not yet looked up from his bow, sensed the shift in the room. He straightened up, confused by Caleb's reaction. He looked from the frozen surgeon to the woman in the chair. He did not recognize her from a family dinner. He only recognized the power. "Good morning, gentlemen," Aaliyah said. Her voice was the same one he had heard on the phone, the same one he had heard at the mall. But it was stripped of all emotion. It was smooth, low, and terrifyingly calm. "I believe you wanted to teach me about the real world, Dr. Sterling. Please, I am listening." Caleb took a step back, his legs hitting the edge of the conference table. He grabbed the mahogany wood for support, his knuckles turning white. The arrogance was gone. The charm was incinerated. In its place was the raw, primal fear of a man who realizes he has been hunting a lion with a water pistol. The trap had not just sprung, it had crushed him. And Aaliyah was just sitting there watching him bleed. A sound tore its way out of Caleb's throat. It was a laugh, but it sounded like glass breaking in a garbage disposal. It was a jagged, frantic noise that bounced off the glass walls and died in the thick carpet. His brain had hit a wall. It simply refused to process the image in front of him. The cognitive dissonance was so violent it physically staggered him. He looked at the woman in the white suit, and his mind superimposed the image of the girl in the hoodie. They could not be the same. The laws of physics in his universe did not allow for the peasant to be the queen. Therefore, this was a trick. It was a prank. It was a lie. "This is rich." Caleb sputtered, his face twisting into a mask of incredulous fury. "This is absolutely rich. Is this a joke? Did Jasmine put you up to this? Is this some kind of twisted role-play game you people play?" He took a step forward, pointing a trembling finger at her face. "Get out of that chair," he barked, his voice cracking. "Get up right now before you ruin the leather." "Who let you in here? Did you sneak in with the cleaning crew? Is that it? You stole a suit and snuck past security to try and embarrass me. You are psychotic. You are actually mentally unstable." He spun around, looking wildly at the closed oak doors, screaming at the wood. "Security! Get in here! We have an intruder! We have a trespasser in the executive suite. Some homeless woman has broken in and is refusing to leave. Someone get the police! I want her arrested! I want her dragged out of here in handcuffs!" He turned back to Aaliyah, his eyes bulging with manic energy. "You have made a big mistake, Aaliyah. A huge mistake. You think you can just walk into a place like this and pretend to be somebody? You are nothing. You are a thief. You are a leech. And now you are going to jail." He reached for his phone, fumbling with the device to dial 911. "I am calling the cops myself. I am going to make sure they lock you up for a long time." Suddenly, a hand clamped down on his arm. It was not a gentle touch. It was a desperate, clawing grip. Dr. Lewis yanked him back with enough force to nearly knock him off balance. Caleb spun around, ready to lash out, but the look on the older man's face stopped him cold. Dr. Lewis was not angry. He was gray. All the blood had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse that had been fished out of the river. His eyes were wide with terror, and he was shaking so hard his teeth were almost chattering. "Shut up, Dr. Lewis," hissed his voice a strangled whisper. "For the love of God, Sterling, shut your mouth! Let go of me!" "Arthur," Caleb snapped, trying to shake him off. "Can you not see what is happening? This is her, the sister, the failure." She broke in. "We need to call security before she steals something." "You idiot," Lewis screamed, the sound tearing at his throat. He pointed a shaking hand toward the wall behind the desk, where a massive patent was framed in gold. "Look at the name Sterling. Look at the damn name on the wall." Caleb frowned, looking past Aaliyah's shoulder. He squinted at the document. "United States Patent. Assignee Vanguard Health Solutions. Inventor Aaliyah Vance." The words swam before his eyes. Inventor Aaliyah Vance. "She is not the cleaning lady." Lewis sobbed, his voice breaking with despair. "She is the founder. She is the CEO. She is Vanguard. You just called the owner of the building a trespasser, you absolute moron. We are dead. We are absolutely dead." The phone slipped from Caleb's fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. Caleb looked from the patent to the woman in the chair. The laugh was gone. The anger was gone. The world he thought he controlled dissolved into mist, leaving him standing on the edge of a cliff he had not even seen coming. I did not rise from my chair. I did not offer him a hand to shake. I did not even blink. I simply sat there, encased in the white suit that cost more than his car, watching the realization wash over him like a bucket of ice water. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, but before the dust settles. Caleb stood frozen, his eyes darting between my face and the patent on the wall, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I slowly extended one hand, the movement deliberate and smooth. I did not point at him. I pointed to the center of the mahogany table. Lying there alone in the vast expanse of polished wood was the black leather portfolio I had printed the night before. It looked small in the massive room, but we both knew it was heavy. It contained the weight of his entire life. "Dr. Sterling." I said, my voice soft, but carrying to the back of the room without effort. "You spent a lot of time 2 days ago explaining to my sister exactly what you thought of me. You called me a disgrace. You called me a pollutant. You said I was bringing down the family name with my presence. You looked at my clothes and you saw a failure. You looked at my face and you saw a thief." I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin on my steeped fingers. "I find that fascinating, Caleb. Because in my experience, people who are obsessed with status are usually the ones who have none. And people who are quick to call others thieves are usually the ones with something in their pockets that does not belong to them." Caleb swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked at the folder, then back at me. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you doing, Aaliyah?" "I am doing what you asked me to do," I replied coldly. "I am showing you the real world." "Go ahead. Open it. Pick it up, Dr. Sterling. Let us see who the real disgrace in this room actually is." He hesitated. His hand shook as he reached out. His fingers brushed the leather. He looked like a man being asked to stick his hand into a fire. Beside him, Dr. Lewis was hyperventilating, clutching his chest as if he were having a heart attack, but Caleb was too focused on his own destruction to notice. He flipped open the cover. The first page was not a partnership agreement, it was not a contract. It was a bank statement from a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Caleb's eyes widened. He flipped the page. A purchase order for spinal implants that never existed. He flipped again. A credit card bill showing a $45,000 charge for a diamond engagement ring, paid for with hospital funds. "You accused me of shoplifting a watch because I was wearing a hoodie," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Yet here you are standing in a $4,000 suit, having stolen $1.5 million from the very hospital you claim to rule. You are not a king, Caleb. You are a common criminal, and you are not even a good one. You left a trail so wide a child could follow it. Did you really think you could walk into my house, into my company, and sell me a lie when I have been watching every move you make for 2 years? The papers slipped from his numb fingers, scattering across the table like autumn leaves. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the arrogance completely extinguished. There was nothing left but naked terror. He realized then that he wasn't looking at his sister-in-law. He was looking at his judge. Dr. Lewis scrambled to pick up the sheets that had fallen from Caleb's trembling hands. He held them up to the blinding light of the window, his eyes scanning the columns of numbers with the frantic speed of a rat trapped in a maze. As he read, the color drained from his face so completely that he looked translucent. He was not just looking at numbers. He was looking at the end of his career. He was looking at the bankruptcy of St. Luke Hospital. He dropped the papers as if they were burning his skin and looked at his star surgeon with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You idiot, Lewis," whispered his voice, strangling in his throat. "You absolute catastrophic fool. You did not just steal. You left a paper trail a mile wide. You billed for patients who are dead. You ordered equipment that does not exist. Do you have any idea what you have done? This is not just a lawsuit, Sterling. This is federal prison. I did not let them bicker." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over the white suit. I picked up my own copy of the summary sheet and began to read aloud. My voice was calm, steady, and relentless. It was the voice of the algorithm delivering a verdict. Item 1, I stated clearly, my eyes locked on Caleb's pale face. Systemic insurance fraud. You billed Blue Cross and Medicare for 300 hours of operating room time on dates when you were actually vacationing in the Bahamas with my sister. We have the flight manifest cross-referenced with the hospital billing logs. You were sipping Mai Tais while claiming to be performing laminectomies. Caleb opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I turned the page, the sound crisp and loud in the silent room. Item 2, procurement fraud. You authorized the purchase of 500 titanium spinal cages from a company called Nexus Surgical, a company that does not exist. The corporate registration leads to a P.O. box in Gary, Indiana, that is registered to your personal Gmail account. You bought inventory from yourself, Caleb, and you paid for it with hospital funds. That is embezzlement 101. I flipped to the next page. This was the one that would bury him. Item 3. Illegal kickbacks. You accepted direct wire transfers from Pharmaceutical X in exchange for prescribing their high addictive opioids over safer generics. That is not just theft, Caleb. That is trafficking. That is endangering human lives for profit. And before you try to open your mouth and blame a nurse or an administrative assistant, let me direct your attention to the bottom of the page. I tapped the document with my index finger. Every single transaction was authorized using your unique digital signature. Every login came from the static IP address of the computer in your private office at the hospital. We have the timestamps. We have the keystroke logs. We know it was you. We know you typed the passwords. We know you hit enter. You thought you were invisible because you were deleting emails. You forgot that on a network I designed, nothing is ever truly deleted. It is just archived for people like me to find. You built your entire life on a foundation of lies, and I just pulled the bottom brick. The transformation in Caleb was immediate and ugly. It was like watching a wax figure melt under a high-intensity heat lamp. The composure, the posture, the practiced tilt of the chin, all of it evaporated in seconds, leaving behind a sweating, trembling mess of a man. He backed away from the table, shaking his head violently, as if he could physically shake the truth out of the air. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, looking for anything other than the facts staring him in the face. He pointed a shaking finger at me. His voice, which had been so smooth and commanding just minutes ago, pitched up into a hysterical shriek. "This is a lie," he screamed. "This is a setup. It is a glitch. Your system is broken. Everyone knows computers make mistakes. You hacked the logs. You changed the data because you hate me. That is what this is, isn't it? It is personal. He turned to Dr. Lewis, grabbing the older man by the lapels of his jacket, shaking him. Arthur, listen to me. She is crazy. She is vindictive. She is doing this because I embarrassed her at the mall. She is doing this because she is jealous that Jasmine is marrying a doctor and she is a spinster. She planted this evidence. She falsified the records to frame me. You cannot believe her. She is just a bitter, angry woman with a computer. He spun back to face me, his face blotchy and red with rage. You think you are so smart, Aaliyah. You think you can destroy me with a spreadsheet. But no one will believe you. I am a respected surgeon. I save lives. You are just a coder. You are a nobody who got lucky. This is a vendetta. It is a pathetic attempt to get back at me for rejecting your family. You are petty, and you are sad. I listened to his tirade without flinching. I let him scream until his voice grew hoarse and his breath came in ragged gasps. I let him expend all his energy trying to fight gravity. When he finally stopped panting and glaring at me, waiting for me to scream back, I simply smiled. It was a cold, terrifyingly empty smile. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my white blazer. I walked around the edge of the massive table, closing the distance between us. I stopped just out of reaching distance, looking at him with the curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. You give yourself too much credit, Caleb, I said, my voice steady and cool. You think I built a billion-dollar infrastructure just to trap you. You think I wrote the most advanced algorithmic auditing system in the world just to settle a score about a coat and a bottle of wine? You are mistaking your own narcissism for my motivation. I gestured to the wall of servers visible through the glass partition in the hallway, where the blue lights pulsed rhythmically. My AI does not know how to hate, I said softly. It does not know jealousy. It does not care that you were rude to me at the mall. It does not care that you date my sister. It does not have feelings, Caleb. It only has functions. And its primary function is to identify truth. It found you not because I told it to look for you, but because you were the anomaly. You were the error in the code. You were the rot in the system. The machine did not frame you. It simply shined a light in the dark, and you happened to be the one standing there holding the stolen money. This is not personal vengeance. This is just data. And unlike you, the data never lies. The truth hit him like a physical blow. I watched the realization sink into his bones. The logic was airtight. The evidence was overwhelming. The walls of the glass box he was standing in seemed to close in on him. He looked at the papers scattered on the table, and then he looked at me. In that split second, the veneer of the civilized doctor vanished completely. The charm was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was a cornered animal realizing the trap had no exit. His face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. His eyes, which had once looked at me with such disdain, now burned with a murderous light. You think you can do this to me? He growled, a low sound that vibrated in his chest. You think you can take everything I built? You are nothing. You are dirt. He moved before I could blink. It was a desperate, clumsy lunge. He scrambled around the edge of the mahogany table, his hands reaching out not to shake mine, but to strangle me. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the source of his destruction physically, because he could no longer do it intellectually. Dr. Lewis screamed a high-pitched sound of terror, but I did not move. I did not flinch. I did not even raise a hand to defend myself. I knew something Caleb did not. I knew I was never alone. Two shadows detached themselves from the wall near the door. They moved with a speed and precision that made Caleb look like he was moving in slow motion. Before his fingers could get within a foot of my white blazer, he was intercepted. A heavy hand clamped onto his shoulder and another swept his legs out from under him. Momentum did the rest. Caleb hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud that shook the room. The expensive Italian wool of his suit scraped against the carpet as he was pinned face down. His arm was twisted behind his back in a professional lock that immobilized him instantly. The air left his lungs in a painful whoosh, but he did not stop fighting. He thrashed against the weight of the security officers, kicking his legs like a petulant child throwing a tantrum. "Get off me!" he screamed, his voice muffled by the carpet before he turned his head to glare up at me. "You bitch! You vindictive, miserable bitch! You planned this! You are jealous of me! You are jealous of us! You cannot stand that I chose Jasmine! You cannot stand that we are happy!" He spat the words out, saliva flying from his lips, landing on the polished shoes of the guard holding him down. "Jasmine is going to kill you for this," he howled, his voice cracking with hysteria. "She will never forgive you. She will make sure you rot. You are trying to ruin her life because you have no life of your own. You are a sad, lonely spinster with a computer, and you're trying to drag us down into the gutter with you. But it won't work. I am Caleb Sterling. I am a god in this city. You cannot touch me." I stood over him, looking down at the man who had terrified my family with his status. From this angle, he looked incredibly small. He looked pathetic. He was ranting about jealousy and love while facing federal indictment. He was still clinging to the delusion that his social standing mattered in a room governed by law. I signaled to the guards. "Get him up," I said quietly. "The police are waiting in the lobby." They hauled him to his feet. His hair was disheveled, his tie was crooked, and his face was purple with rage. He was still screaming, still cursing, still invoking my sister's name as if it were a magic spell that could save him. But the magic was gone. The show was over. And as they dragged him toward the door, kicking and screaming, I felt absolutely nothing but the cold, clean satisfaction of a job well done. The heavy oak doors swung open one final time. This was not private security. Two agents wearing navy windbreakers with federal badges on their belts stepped into the room. They moved with the quiet efficiency of men who did this every day. They walked straight to Caleb, who was still panting in the grip of my guards. One agent pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. The metallic click as they ratcheted shut around Caleb's wrists was the loudest sound in the room. It was the sound of a life ending. "Caleb Sterling, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering." The agent recited, his voice flat and bored. Caleb slumped, his fight finally draining out of him as the reality of the metal biting into his skin took hold. I walked over to the wall panel near the window. I pressed a single button. The sheer automated blinds that had been filtering the harsh sunlight slowly retracted upward. The entire glass wall was now open, exposing us completely to the city below. I pointed down to the plaza. "Look, Caleb," I said softly. "I told you I wanted this to be a memorable day." Down on the sidewalk, a sea of cameras and satellite vans was waiting. I had tipped them off an hour ago. They were hungry for a scandal, and I was serving them the main course. As the agents marched him toward the door, I watched his eyes widen in horror as he looked down. He realized his walk of shame was not just ending in a cell. It was going to be the lead story on the 6 o'clock news, and he was the star. It did not take long for the vultures to pick up the scent. Once the news helicopters broadcast the footage of Caleb being led out of Vanguard Tower in handcuffs, the secret of my address was splashed across every local blog. My parents drove straight to the Pinnacle, their car screeching to a halt at the gate. They marched up to the security booth, demanding to see their daughter, shouting that they were the parents of the CEO. But for the first time in their lives, their entitlement hit a solid wall. My head of security, Marcus, simply crossed his arms and told them I was unavailable. They were not let up. They were told to wait in the lobby like delivery drivers. And wait, they did. For 3 agonizing hours, they sat on the stiff designer sofas, ignored by the wealthy residents walking their poodles. When I finally decided to descend from the penthouse, the elevator doors opened to a scene of absolute desperation. My mother, Beatrice, launched herself at me before I could even step off the marble floor. Her mascara was running down her face in dark, jagged streaks, and her hair was wild. She did not hug me. She did not ask how I was. She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate and shaking, digging her nails into my suit. "You have to stop this, Aaliyah," she wailed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings, causing the concierge to look up. "You have the power now. We saw the news. You have the money. Call the police and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Buy the judge. Get the best lawyers in the city. You have to get him out immediately. Not for him, but for us. Think of the scandal, Aaliyah. Think of our reputation in the community. Everyone is talking. Our neighbors are laughing at us. You cannot let your sister's fiancé go to prison like a common thug. You have to use your influence to save the family honor. Fix it. Fix it right now." I looked down at my mother's hand clutching the sleeve of my white suit. I did not feel anger anymore. I only felt a deep, profound pity. They were so small. They were so blind. I gently removed her hand from my arm and took a step back, creating a physical boundary between their hysteria and my reality. "Do you really believe that Father's pension covers the rent on that townhouse in the historic district?" I asked, my voice quiet, but cutting through the lobby like a razor. "You have been living in a fantasy. For the last 5 years, I have been paying your landlord. I set up the anonymous trust that covers your bills. And Jasmine. She thinks she is a fashion icon. She thinks she has an unlimited budget. Who do you think pays off that supplementary credit card every month? It is not Caleb. It is me. I have been funding the very lifestyle you use to mock me. I have been subsidizing the clothes you wear to look down on me." I watched the color drain from their faces as the truth hit them. The arrogance evaporated. "Consider this your notice," I said, cold and final. "As of this moment, the accounts are closed. The cards are canceled. The rent is no longer my problem. You wanted me to leave the family alone. Congratulations. You got your wish. You are on your own." I turned on my heel, and the sound of my stilettos clicking against the marble floor was the only answer I gave them. I walked toward the revolving doors that led to the street, not rushing, not running, but moving with the steady, inevitable pace of time itself. Behind me, I heard the commotion. I heard the desperate scramble of footsteps as they realized I was actually leaving. They followed me out of the warmth of the lobby and into the biting cold of the Chicago winter. The wind hit us the moment we stepped onto the sidewalk. It was a frigid gust that carried snowflakes the size of coins. I stopped by the curb where the long black limousine was idling, its exhaust plumbing white clouds into the gray air. My driver Marcus stood by the rear door, his gloved hand resting on the handle, his face impassive and professional. He did not look at the screaming people behind me. He only looked at me, waiting for the command. I turned around one last time. The scene before me was like a Renaissance painting of despair. Jasmine had collapsed onto the icy pavement. The designer dress she was wearing, the one she had bragged about for weeks, now looked ridiculous. It was a garment made for a ballroom, not for begging on a slush-covered sidewalk. The fabric was wet at the hem, and as she shivered violently, the dress seemed to hang on her like a cheap costume. The illusion of glamour was gone. Without the confidence of my money backing her up, she looked small and frail and incredibly ordinary. She was sobbing loudly, her makeup running in dark rivulets down her face, screaming that she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, that she needed me. But the words were carried away by the wind. My parents stood behind her, huddled together against the cold. Without the artificial warmth of the lifestyle I had provided, they looked suddenly ancient. My father, Elijah, who always stood so tall with his chest puffed out in pride, was hunched over his shoulders, shaking. My mother, Beatrice, looked at me with eyes that were no longer judging but terrified. She looked at the luxury car, and then back at the snowy street, and I saw the realization hit her. She saw the future. She saw the bills piling up. She saw the cold house. She saw the end of the masquerade. They were just two old people standing in the snow, realizing they had thrown away the only child who had ever actually loved them. I did not feel a surge of triumph. I did not feel the need to laugh or to gloat. I just felt a heavy weight lift off my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I had been carrying for my entire adult life. It was the weight of their expectations, the weight of their judgment, the weight of buying their love. I reached into my purse and pulled out my sunglasses. The sky was overcast gray and dull, but I put them on anyway. I didn't need them to block the sun. I needed them to create a final barrier. I needed to cover my eyes so they could no longer look into me and take what they wanted. I nodded to Marcus. He pulled the heavy door open. I slid into the back seat, the smell of warm leather enveloping me instantly. It was quiet inside, safe. I pressed the button to roll up the window. As the glass rose, it cut off the sound of Jasmine wailing. It cut off the sight of my parents shivering in the snow. It turned them into a silent movie, a scene from a life I used to live. As the car pulled away, merging smoothly into the traffic, I leaned back into the seat. A small smile touched my lips. It was not a smile of victory. Victory implies a battle, and I was done fighting. It was a softer smile. It was the smile of a prisoner who walks out of the gates after a long sentence and feels the sun on her face for the first time. The city moved past the window, a blur of lights and motion. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the conditioned air. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, I was free. The most profound lesson from this story is that true power often moves in silence. While Aaliyah's family was consumed by the loud illusion of status and wealth, she quietly owned the reality of it. It teaches us that we must never define our worth by the validation of others, nor judge anyone by their appearance. Disrespect often comes from insecurity, but the best revenge is not an argument, it is massive, undeniable success. Build your empire in the shadows, protect your peace, and let your results be the only noise that finally silences your doubters forever. If you are ready to let your success make the noise, hit that subscribe button and comment "Silent Victory" below to claim your power today.